Hello and howdy, Alyssa Nicoll here. I'm so excited about being able to be with you for the next 30 minutes and go over a subject that I'm really passionate about, which is CSS. Now, when doing my due diligence and putting in the time to collect the tips that I have while learning CSS over the last few years, and make a maintainable styles talk, I of course ran into the exciting topic about accessibility and inclusivity inside your styles. And so I was excited to share this, and as I advanced my plan, I was hoping to inspire you with not only maintainable and reusable styles, but also accessible and inclusive styles. So I had my game plan. I was continuing down the journey of writing this talk, and of course I ran into the latest specs of what's happening in the CSS world, which led me to some forecasts about things like Sass and SCSS, and of course those have a role in all four categories or topics that we're going to touch on today. So I know I only have 30 minutes with you, but I hope that whether you are doing the daily struggle of pixel pushing or whether you're just now entering this world of markup and styles, I hope that you can find something useful from this monologue of a girl who is just in love with the front of the front end. So let's dive in. The first pillar we're going to talk about today is accessibility. Now, we will get into some specifics on being more accessible when you're building out a component or a specific element. But I find this word accessibility thrown around quite a lot, so much so that it, for me at least, tends to become one of those buzzwords that loses all sense of the meaning. So let's start fresh from the beginning and define it. So I love the aside from a book that I will read this excerpt in a minute, but this book is going to be, we're going to use a demo from it, and it's actually going to be the resource for this accessibility pillar in my talk. So each of the four items that we're going to talk about, categories that we're going to talk about, I have a suggested resource of the year, and seriously, this book was a 10 out of 10, would recommend. It was just very thoughtfully written and an easy read. But I love this aside, and I'll pull it up now. It says, some operate screen readers to assist their understanding of an interface. Others may be visually dyslexic or have low literacy. There are even those who have little physical or cognitive trouble understanding an interface who simply prefer to have it read out to them sometimes. Supporting screen reader software is supporting screen reader software, not blind people. And I love that. It's absolutely beautiful. Assistive technology oftentimes can be just kind of thrown into a category and not really thought of as a whole. And so I wanted to give us a basis, right, like a baseline for what I mean by accessibility today. And so again, this book, killer, 10 out of 10, would recommend. But we're going to dive into a demo. So before we hop into the code, I want to give this little tidbit that I will say once, I will say 1,000 times. 90% of accessible code is semantic markup. And of course, semantic markup just means using HTML elements how they were created to be used, right? Picking the right one for the job, and not having any filler or extra cruff around your markup. Just very clean semantic markup. And you might be wondering to yourself, what about the other 10%? Which that is just augmentation to your semantic markup that you layer in as you go. And we are going to talk about so many really cool points that you can use to make your markup and to make your components more accessible and inclusive. And so I'm really excited. Let's jump over there now. So we're going to go ahead and work in CodePen today, codepen.io if you're unfamiliar with it. And this is just a place where you can work in the browser to create demos or test ideas. I highly recommend it if you never use it. But yes, let's get started. Our demo is going to be, you guessed it, in the guise of a to-do application. And so let's go ahead and build out I guess like really the basic items of the to-do, which in my mind would be the input, and that can get a placeholder of new item, and also a button, which will be, this will be to submit our new item. And at this point, I guess we'll just give it a little plus, a plus guy here. Beautiful. I mean, that's absolutely gorgeous. Although I can't really see a whole lot because the font, I don't know if it's just me, but the font by default in the browser is like itty bitty. So we're going to go ahead and call out the body and give it a font size of 40 pixels. And you might be like, goodness gracious, that's ridiculous. And it's mad at me because I haven't saved it. Yes, 40 is a lot. Let's go ahead and label it maintainable styles. Yes, thank you. That is what I want to save it as. 40 pixels might sound like a whole bunch, and which we're actually not seeing it right now. We need to apply it to input and button as well as body. And you're like, goodness, Alyssa, that's ridiculous. It's fine. It's fine. I think it looks great. So we're just going to move on. But a couple things to talk about here. By default, input with our type of placeholder, something to always keep in mind is to have a thought out default state or empty state or null state. And so new item isn't as helpful as it could be. Putting something like EG or IE and then like buy milk is super, super helpful because this is letting the person know like there's still something to do here, or like whenever they glance, which with a to-do like list, right? A to-do app, obviously like there's an input, there's a button, right? It's very straightforward. It's very simple. But in more verbose examples, it's not always straightforward. So think about your empty state, think about your null state. The next one is our submit button. And we actually have, I'm going to be pulling out VoiceOver because I'm on Mac, and so that'll just be easiest for us to hear it for talking about accessibility things and hearing. But when I pull her up, which I'll pull her up right now, you'll hear that the plus button is announced, which is like not ideal. So what we can do, I mean, we could, of course, have like add new item, but you know, we decide that that really messes with our UI and we don't want it to say add new item. But you can actually have the best of both worlds. And this is the 10% augmentation that I was talking about with an ARIA label. And so you will see that this ARIA label is announced instead of the symbol that's within the button's value, which is just absolutely beautiful. So add new item, and yeah, let's go to it. Let's pull it up. And if you are on a Mac and you're like, hey, how do I pull this up? I want to hear also. Enable VoiceOver can be found inside of the accessibility menu in your system preferences. So check it out.
VoiceOver on system preferences.
Okay. And we're going to go over here and select
VoiceOver, Chrome, Maintainable Styles, Google Chrome, Alyssa, window, edit text, blank. You are currently on a text area inside of web content. To exit this web area, press caps lock, shift, up arrow. Add new item button. You are currently.
So you heard that she announced add new item button. If I take off the ARIA label.
Edit text. ARIA label equals add new item. You are currently on a text area inside of web plus button.
So you only get the plus button announced if you don't have that ARIA label. So very, very important. And oftentimes when you're wondering, what can I do to, add new item. What can I do to augment this, to make this more accessible, ARIA. Look to ARIA, look at what attributes are offered for the things that you're building out, and maybe pull up VoiceOver or whatever screen reader assistive technology that either your browser or your PC or your Mac offer, and check it out, see what it sounds like, and that will give you a place to jumpstart and start digging in. It's very much like I've recently gotten into cycling, and honestly, I love it. I did my first 70 mile a couple days ago. I'm going to do my first 100 mile in a couple weeks, and I'm crazy about it. It's amazing. But I actually had absolutely zero idea what I was doing on my first ride, right? I bought a bike and I just went out with the group. And ever since then, I've just been learning and layering. And that is how a lot of life can be and is. And it's okay that it is. This is an overwhelming topic to have accessible, maintainable CSS forever and all time, right? Like it's very expansive. So taking it one step at a time and deciding, yeah, I'm going to turn on the assistive technology, whatever it is for you. Mine's VoiceOver. And I'm going to walk through this component or walk through this flow on this wizard or whatever the thing is. And see if you can just add one thing to like enhance it, right? And I'd call that a win for the day. So the next part that we need to do is generally you can get away with single input, single buttons, for this to-do list or for other examples that are very basic, but it is generally best practice to wrap them in a form. Obviously, it's not going to change the look, and even if it did, we could override that. It's going to be for how it behaves and how screen readers and other assistive technologies treat it. And so it is just a rule of thumb, wrap it in a form. Like it costs you what, a line or two of extra markup? Like just do it. Just do it. Okay, and so we're going to tab that over. And I'm not going to do that at this moment because I want to talk about the next thing that we should be doing by default, which is a label. And this is for, I'm going to say to-do item, and we will give this input an ID of to-do item. And the label is add a new to-do item to your list. Right? I mean, she's large. So something that you might be thinking is, because I know there's many different ways of either like turning your placeholder like into a label whenever the input's selected, or even having like no label for cases like this. And this, again, it's a super simple to-do application, right? It's very straightforward. But having the label for like the announcement, because once you start typing here, right, and you're like, right, in any kind of form, once you start typing and that placeholder is gone, you have no idea what it is. And so I mean, it obviously doesn't have to be that long, but a label is needed, but it doesn't have to be visually there, right? So there is something, let me pull up the website. I'm so excited to show you this, called Visually Hidden, which apparently if you just Google the class of Visually Hidden, it's a thing. But on this Ali Project website, it talks about this, like, I guess this pattern, I'm not really sure what to call it. It's basically a set of styles that are used commonly to hide things that you don't want in your UI, but that you think should still be there for assistive technology. And obviously, it's got things that maybe if you're new to CSS or you just don't use clip-rect often, because like, who does? It can be overwhelming. So this is one of those, you file it away in the bank that it's there, and you either look it up or you like add it to your notes. because it is a beautiful way, and it's a very clean way of hiding something that you want around. And so we're going to give you want around for screen readers. So let's give this visually hidden. So now it will be removed from the flow. Beautiful, gorgeous. But when we pull back up our voiceover, we'll be able to hear it announced inside our form. And for funsies, why don't we try out ChromeVox this time? And so if we go to my extensions and scroll down, we can enable it. Go back over here.
ChromeVox spoken feedback is ready. Add a new to-do item. Add a new to-do item with int e.g. buy milk. Add new item. Add a new to-do item with int e.g. buy milk. Edit text.
So you saw that both when we clicked just like in the form itself or when we clicked in the input, that the label for that first input was announced with it. It did kind of push to do together because of that, and I always wonder if is it one word, is it two? So since it's not visual anyways, I think it'll sound better if I make it 2 words. So I've been neglecting our, general styles and markupness. So let's go ahead and add a couple of things like an H1, and we're going to need an unordered list to go ahead and list out our to-do items, right? So let me just put a comment here of to-do items here. Beautiful. And at this point, the application, as it grows, let's say we get like a nav or a profile section or a sidebar, we're going to want to group this to-do bit together, right? This in one unified piece. And oftentimes one might reach for a div or a span, but I am here to encourage you to grab a section. And this is where the semantic bits come in. So a div and a span, one's inline, one's block. They don't have any other meaning other than just wrappers, and just block level or inline level wrappers. So a section is just a little bit more than that, and you can actually attach a header to a section so that when a section is selected with whether you're tabbing through or you're using a cursor or you're tapping, that header will be announced. And so really, really cool thing, ARIA labeled by. And for some reason, I always struggle to spell labeled. There's 2 L's, labeled by. And then that needs to match the ID of the header. And so it doesn't actually matter what the identifier here is, as long as they match. Perfect. So this section is now tied to this H1, and some screen readers, like Microsoft's MVDA, I don't know if there's like a better pronunciation. In my head I say NVDA, but I'm pretty sure that's not proper. But some will actually, when that section is entered, will announce the H1. Both ChromeVox and the voiceover on my Mac system, they don't announce it, but some do. And it's a really great way of just basically labeling the section and giving it a bit more of an identifier. Let's go ahead, and now that we've learned about ARIA labeled by, and we've talked about visually hidden, the class, which I can actually close this, I'm going to dive into styling our application just a little bit, adding a little bit of fun, and we can talk about Sass and maintainability as we go. And then I have, I think, one more really juicy accessibility tip near the end before we wrap up. So first things first, we have done basically nothing, right? We have visually hidden the label that is announced with screen readers and still tied to this input, but it's hidden. We haven't really done anything else other than that and given a font size. So let's go ahead and just dive in. Let's give I have a couple of colors here. Some colors. A blue and a pink. And I think this would be a really good time to pull in some Sass. So in CodePen, you can go ahead and click the little cog and say what preprocessor you would like. I'm going to choose SCSS so that I can keep my curly braces. I love my curly braces. But this is going to give us things like variables, nesting, and mixins as well, which we'll talk a bit about. So I've picked out some colors, blue and a pink, and then I also have a yellow. Where is that yellow? It's beautiful. You're gonna love it. You're gonna be like, this is gorgeous. And I'm gonna name it R yellow. And so there are such things as CSS variables, and they look a little bit different. And they actually require scoping. So I prefer Sass variables, especially when I'm using Sass or SCSS anyways. I like to stick to one or the other. So if it's a project that doesn't have Sass, obviously we're going to have CSS variables. But that includes something like what that would look like if you're completely unfamiliar with it is we would define our blue like this. And then it's the same type of definition. And it needs to be scoped. So usually you'll scope it to something like root. And then in order to use it, so let's say we want like the color of the font everywhere to be that blue color, you would have to then wrap it in var, which to me is a bit disgusting. So yes, we have our blue, our pink, our yellow. I'm actually going to style the H1's color, and a good rule of thumb when you're throwing in styles on your page, I learned this a long time ago, is to stick with the kind of style top down. So our H1 is first, and then if we need to do, let's say, specific button styles, that's going to go below the H1 because in the markup it is below. Now you might be like, wait, what about this body input button? I'm choosing to do any group styling at the top. And so group styles at the top, and then I will go forth and pick out individual H1 and then input and then button. And then at the very bottom, because these are all selectors for the element themselves, right? This is the body, this is the input, this is the button, that's the element itself. Then at the bottom, even more specific than calling out an element is calling out an element's class. And so that's why visually hidden, I will keep it at the bottom. And so I try to more generic at the top, more specific at the bottom, and then follow the order of your markup is kind of a good rule of thumb. Button, let's go ahead and give it a border of 2 pixels solid. And then I'm just going to throw out lime green. I'm going to check it out. And I'm going to copy some things real quick just to speed up because we don't have time for me to build out as slowly as I would like. So let's go over it. Gorgeous. You're like, I've never seen such a sexy button. I know, you're welcome. And actually I don't want the blue color everywhere. Okay, so we've taken away the border and the border radius on the default button. And we've given the lime green color. And then we have a padding to puff out our button a bit. And a transition, and this is for these next two things where the background color and the border color are changing on hover and focus for the button. And focus happens whenever the button is either clicked into focus or tabbed over focus. So we'll see that. So as I hover over our button, we have that lime green color that's actually fading. And this is where mix-ins come in. So I'm using this darken mix-in which is a Sass mix-in that's going to allow us to take any color we'd like as the first parameter, and then the percentage that we need it to go darker. And I love. I'm also using, you'll see within the darken mix-in on focus, a transparentize. So I'm not only making the lime green color darker, but I'm also making it 0.5 or 50%, I guess, opaque. So when I click in here, you'll see that the button has now that border. And I love these mix-ins because they allow you to use like variations of a color. So what we should do is we should take lime green to make this more maintainable, more reusable. Anytime you find yourself using something that's outside of your variables, but you're using it in many different places, you need to make a variable for it. So we will say our green. And of course, we could be more specific, but I don't have a reason to at this point in this application. So I've gone ahead and fast forwarded this a little bit since we're running out of time. But we've talked about variables, which can help greatly with maintaining your styles. I've also used some flex styles to center and align our form. So check those out. I will definitely be sharing the link in the resources, but there are 2 more accessibility things I wanted to talk about before we wrap. So let's jump on over to slides and I will share those with you. So let's talk about styling placeholders. I'm so excited about this because it touches both on maintainability and just the how you do it of CSS. So this, as you can see, is our input with our placeholder of EG by milk. And then these below are actually the ways that you can select that placeholder and style them per browser. And so here we are selecting webput input placeholder, and that's going to do Chrome, Safari, and Opera. And then Moz placeholder for newer Firefox, Moz input placeholder for older Firefox. And notice that the older Firefox only has 1 semicolon, not 2 like the rest, which I know is fun, confusing. And then lastly, MS input placeholder for IE 10 and up. And these placeholders allow you to style the value of the placeholder attribute on the input. And so we'll go ahead and add that into our styles, but I wanted to talk about these prefixes because no commas or nestling here is allowed. Unfortunately, the browsers get confused when they see other browser prefixes, and so they each need to be on their very own block. So very good pointer. I'm going to go ahead and add that into our styles right now. So I've added our prefixes to go ahead and style the placeholder in all of our browsers. I have also given that gorgeous background color to our body, and I've added a bit of jQuery, as you can see down here, that on form submit, it's going to first prevent the default and add a new item to our UL list, which if you look right here is just this empty UL list that's waiting for LIs. Of course, this isn't grabbing the value off the input, but we can do that in a bit. What we are here for is to talk about this UL list. So when we click the button, new items are populating the list. But something really, really cool that I recently learned is something called live regions. And so we can actually give not only a role of status to this UL, but we can highlight this UL with an ARIA live region. And we'll set it to polite. And so now what is going to happen is when items are added here, read aloud. It's absolutely amazing.
Add new item, button, bullet, new item, bullet, new item.
So my last tip of today is about maintainability across your team. And Figma is actually a new tool that I've been learning recently that can help with collaborating between the design part of your team and the front end or the dev part of your team. And so if you use Kendo UI, we are actually releasing Figma kits for our different flavors. And so check out our Figma kit. It's actually really, really cool way just to help collaboration on your team and maintain maintainability. But I appreciate you all so very much for watching my maintainable, accessible, etc. talk on CSS. I hope you learned something today, and reach out to me on Twitter if you have any questions or comments or just want to chat. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, it's Joe Eames with ng-conf. If you like that video, be sure to click subscribe either here or here, somewhere over here. And if you're looking for something more, here's another video for you to watch here or there or somewhere.